Time Rift, The Station on the Brink.
The International Space Station orbited Earth at roughly 27,600 kilometers per hour, completing a full circuit of the planet every 90 minutes. It stood as a powerful symbol of international cooperation and human ambition to explore beyond our terrestrial boundaries. Inside, microgravity shaped the daily routine, while scientific experiments ran ceaselessly, generating valuable data for various space agencies. Every solar panel and connecting module testified to the joint efforts of multiple nations over many years, all to sustain a permanent human presence in orbit. Within one of the station's nodes, control panels blinked softly, providing the sole continuous light besides the intense sunlight that periodically poured through certain windows. Because the ISS orbited Earth every hour and a half, station inhabitants experienced a sunrise or sunset about every 45 minutes. This rapid cycle of light and darkness could affect their internal body clocks, but over time, astronauts had learned to adapt using artificially managed schedules. At one of the main computers, critical information from different experiments converged. Biological, geophysical, and engineering tasks were all managed here. Among them was a cosmic ray detection project that measured subatomic particles. The software filtered the enormous influx of data bombarding the environment, searching for patterns and anomalies of interest. For the astronauts, it was an important addition to the usual suite of research on board, as space provides a unique setting to study high-energy physics without terrestrial atmospheric interference. At that time, the ISS crew comprised 6 permanent members, plus a 7th individual recently arrived on a short-term mission. Each astronaut officially represented a different country. Yet, in practice, national lines blurred in favor of daily teamwork inside their confined habitat, where oxygen, water, and food were strictly rationed and carefully managed. Organization was paramount. Everything was tethered or stored in sealed bags, preventing items from floating away in weightlessness. During the initial weeks of this expedition, conditions were rather calm. The priority involved basic engineering tasks, routine maintenance, and medical research into human physiology and microgravity. At certain intervals, astronauts performed extravehicular activities, EVAs, to repair solar panels and upgrade external instruments. The arrival of the 7th crew member, a short-duration visitor from Earth, was but another event in the station's usual logistics. A resupply vessel docked, some personnel rotated, and standard procedures continued. No one suspected anything extraordinary brewing just beyond standard protocols. But subtle signs began to emerge indicating unusual phenomena in the surrounding space. For several days, ISS antennae detected anomalous spikes in microwave band radiation. Initially written off as minor fluctuations in cosmic rays, these readings began showing irregularities, prompting the crew to forward the data to ground control. The initial reply from Earth was inconclusive. Earth-based satellites had also recorded anomalies, but could not identify a clear solar or cosmic cause. Mission control simply advised continued vigilance and more data collection. Unbeknownst to the crew, a change in the local structure of time had already begun. This shift was imperceptible at first, corresponding to those electromagnetic spikes. Within hours, several astronauts found their internal sense of time out of sync. One had trouble sleeping, attributing it to the constant transitions between daylight and darkness. Another felt as though fewer hours had passed than the station's clock indicated. Such disorientation could be explained by the unusual schedule and perpetual sunlight changes, so it was initially dismissed as normal astronaut fatigue. Yet these small discrepancies in daily timing escalated into something more troubling, as the station's systems soon registered a dramatic event, one that would confirm the existence of an unprecedented temporal phenomenon on board. Inside the ISS, 7 individuals coexisted, each carrying expertise and personal stories that gave shape to the station's unique atmosphere. Their backgrounds and personalities influenced how each would react to the ensuing crisis. The robotic systems engineer, a woman highly skilled in orbital robotics and drone programming. Meticulous and enthusiastic, she had devoted her career to extending human capability in space via autonomous devices. Here, she focused on maintaining the station's robotic arm used for manipulating cargo and repairing external modules. The particle physicist, a man specializing in cosmic ray research, responsible for a subatomic experiment that measured high-energy particles hitting the station. Introspective and methodical, he carried a small notebook for making handwritten observations in microgravity, then matching them against digital logs. He was particularly drawn to any detector anomaly, hoping for breakthroughs on dark matter or unknown quantum processes. The mission medical officer, a doctor with expertise in human physiology under low gravity. She monitored each astronaut's health, kept track of vital signs, administered supplements, and oversaw bone and muscle condition in microgravity. Her calm, empathetic nature made her an ideal mediator for the everyday stresses of station life. The life support systems specialist, a middle-aged individual whose main duty was to keep the station's atmosphere safe, monitoring oxygen levels, carbon dioxide removal, humidity, and temperature controls. He also oversaw water recycling and waste management. Passionate about environmental engineering, he conducted research on closed-loop technologies essential for future missions to the Moon, Mars, or beyond. The geophysics specialist, an investigator representing a European research center, focused on monitoring instruments that studied Earth's geophysical data from orbit, gravitational shifts, tectonic motion, and atmospheric variations. Though her main field was geodesy, curiosity led her to delve into other station experiments as well. The mission commander, a veteran astronaut with several space flights under his belt, he served as a pilot in earlier missions and now led quietly, garnering respect through reliability rather than strict authority. Having witnessed multiple station expeditions, he was versed in troubleshooting complex problems and ensuring every crew member had the resources they needed. The recent arrival, a young astrophysicist on a short-term stay, intending to gather crucial data on Earth's magnetic field interactions with solar plasma. Eager to make the most of his 30-day sojourn, he was excited by the microgravity lifestyle and hoped to compile findings for advanced research back on Earth. Initially, these 7 worked in harmony, tackling assigned tasks by the schedule, abiding by safety rules, and filing routine updates to Earth-based control. However, irregularities in electromagnetic readings soon grew, culminating in puzzling data from cosmic ray detectors. Early on, such anomalies prompted only mild concern. Perhaps it was a technical glitch or a routine cosmic event. But small time slip symptoms quickly multiplied. Some experiments triggered themselves too early or too late, misreading the onboard clock by minutes. In a precisely orchestrated environment, that alone was unsettling. The particle physicist noticed that a detector that should log a certain number of events over 4 hours had done so in barely 3. Meanwhile, the robotic engineer encountered an unanticipated issue. The station's robotic arm executed movements not listed in its program log, as if receiving phantom orders. Every procedure in space is meticulously recorded, leaving little room for random events. Further alarm came from the medical officer's observations, for crew members reported confusion in aligning meal times and sleep cycles, as if they each inhabited different daily routines. One might say lunch was just an hour ago, while another remembered the same meal happening hours earlier. These mismatched memories overshadowed normal station disorientation. Rumblings of an actual temporal anomaly started circulating among the crew. At that point, the phenomenon still seemed subtle, though increasingly noticeable. The puzzle pieces converged into a single question. Could an external cosmic factor be warping time itself around the ISS? By the expedition's third week, the ISS was passing over the Pacific during local night. The station's exterior was in darkness, lit only by faint lunar glow reflecting off its solar arrays. From Earth's surface, the ISS would be a bright spot crossing the sky in minutes. Meanwhile, inside the station, the newly arrived astrophysicist was calibrating instruments, taking advantage of orbital night to reduce light interference for certain spectral measurements. Without warning, a sudden spike in high-frequency electromagnetism hit the station's sensors. Control panels flickered, lights fluctuated. On Earth, such an event might go unnoticed, but on the ISS, essentially a large metallic craft turned cosmic antenna, the crew felt a definite jolt. Within seconds, the navigation system and station clocks indicated a temporal shift, about 9 seconds backward. It was as though 9 seconds of normal time had been erased, replaced by a repeated segment. The station's logs recorded overlapping timestamps for different events, something normally impossible. Chaos ensued. The commander checked readouts and discovered that the ISS orbital position data suggested the craft had momentarily jumped back along its orbit, even though no thrusters had fired. According to all known laws of motion, it should be impossible for a massive station to spontaneously shift velocity or retrace its path. Yet the readings were plain. Somehow, the station had repeated a portion of its flight track. During these duplicated seconds, certain crew actions made no sense. One astronaut recalled moving a container of samples, but found it back in its original spot. Another reached for a tool only to find it had reverted to a prior location. These disjunctions clearly went beyond simple memory slips. By the time the timeline resensed, the crew realized they had experienced a genuine temporal glitch, not a mere software error. They immediately relayed a summary to Earth, but communications faced new interference and delay. Mission Control on the ground, upon eventually replying, indicated no sign of a global shift in Earth time. This suggested the event was localized to the station's orbit. Nearby satellites had not reported anything similar, only minor electromagnetic disturbances. Tension rose aboard the ISS as the commander urged calm, but could not provide rational reassurance in the face of such an impossible phenomenon. Internally, the station team knew that if time could briefly rewind, there was no telling what might come next. Could these anomalies grow stronger? Could they get trapped in a permanent loop? Lacking immediate answers, each astronaut quietly worried, though none voiced outright panic. The entire community on the ISS realized they were grappling with a phenomenon unaccounted for in any standard manual. This moment, commonly recalled as the double timestamp incident, marked the point of no return. It confirmed that the ISS was subject to real distortions of time and space, catapulting the crew into a predicament unlike any in the history of manned orbital missions. In the wake of that first major glitch, further anomalies became both frequent and less subtle. Tiny loopbacks of milliseconds, then fractions of a second, piled up. Repeated or missing seconds crept into the station's logs. Discrepancies in timestamps multiplied, leaving the crew scrambling to document every new instance of time out of joint. For example, the doctor overseeing biological growth experiments in microgravity noticed that certain incubated cell cultures lagged behind schedule, whereas others advanced too fast, despite identical conditions. It was as if each group of cells were subject to a separate flow of time. This provided physical proof that the anomaly extended beyond clocks and electronics. It directly affected biological processes. Meanwhile, the life support specialists saw contradictory oxygen readings. In some intervals, oxygen consumption soared, suggesting the crew was breathing more heavily or for longer stretches. At other times, the station's systems indicated an inexplicable surplus of oxygen. Checking logs against daily crew routines, he noticed these consumption spikes often coincided with the same electromagnetic pulses that threatened time's linear progression. It felt as though the station environment and the crew's own biology were drifting between parallel time frames. Subtle orbital deviations further escalated the crisis. Despite no planned maneuvers, the ISS attitude control read microshifts in velocity or orientation, as if invisible tugs acted upon it. The commander, outwardly composed, was unsettled by these ghostly impulses. He correlated them with the light flickers and data spikes, deducing that each wave of energy threatened station stability. It became obvious that these repeated temporal jolts could eventually lead to a catastrophic mechanical failure if not resolved. The entire team felt the psychological toll. Sleep became erratic. Crew members already struggling with standard microgravity disruptions now faced existential dread. What if the next time glitch lasted minutes, hours, or never resolved? Even the commander, stoic by nature, showed signs of fatigue. Tension simmered beneath the everyday tasks, fueling silent fears. As anomalies worsened, the question of how to stop them loomed. The cosmic ray data gathered so far implied these pulses might stem from an external event, some cosmic phenomenon interacting with Earth's magnetosphere. But no one aboard knew how to halt a cosmic process from the confines of a fragile station. The ground-based mission control likewise had no protocol for reversing local time distortions. Quietly, some astronauts considered whether a hasty evacuation might be the only choice, though that too was complicated by a lack of immediate return craft for everyone, not to mention the danger that approaching spacecraft could also become ensnared in the anomaly. The next phase demanded urgent action, or the ISS risked degenerating into a swirling nexus of repeated hours and contradictory events. Before attempting an actual fix, the crew needed further data. Gathering every scrap of sensor output, they prepared to mount a concerted effort to either contain or disable the anomaly. Confronted with daily chaos, the ISS astronauts devised a containment protocol. Overseen by the commander, the particle physicist, and the short-term astrophysicist, this plan revolved around the theory that electromagnetic resonance within the ISS structure fueled the time disturbances. The containment strategy included circuit isolation, temporarily shutting down non-essential power grids, hoping to reduce electromagnetic coupling surfaces. They suspended certain high-demand experiments that might generate or amplify stray signals, rearranging station mass, slightly shifting external modules to minimize internal cavities that could act as resonant chambers. Using the station's robotic arm, they attempted a subtle repositioning of certain components, though no big reconfiguration was feasible without risking structural damage. Generating counterinterference pulses, the visiting astrophysicist proposed broadcasting carefully designed EM signals via the station's Ku-band antenna. The objective was to produce waves out of phase with the detected cosmic pulses, thus neutralizing or canceling part of the energy feeding the time loops. Admittedly, this was highly speculative, but they had few alternatives. For several days, the crew poured effort into these tasks. The station entered a semi-standby mode. Minimal life support, dimmer cabin lights, most scientific modules shut off. The robotic engineer coordinated with the life support specialist to ensure that relocating certain mass components wouldn't compromise structural integrity. Meanwhile, the medical officer, aware of the increased stress, monitored mental and physical well-being closely. Early attempts yielded a glimmer of success. For a couple of hours after beginning the EM counterbroadcast, the station logs did not record backward jumps. The staccato flickers in the electric system subsided. Tension partially eased, and the crew took this as a sign they were on the right track. But their relief was short-lived. As they ramped up the interference signal's power, a new external pulse struck simultaneously, causing an even larger time slip, 23 seconds this time. Worse, the station's modules reacted differently. Some sections moved backward, others seemed to leap forward in time. It was as though the entire station fractured into separate timelines. The robotic arm, mid-operation, froze. Half the crew lost that 23-second interval from memory, while the others remembered it vividly. The medical officer discovered that the station was effectively splitting into pockets of misaligned chronology. This fiasco demoralized the team. Not only did the partial fix fail, it seemed to aggravate the condition. They now faced segmented time flows within the same structure, rendering normal cooperation a logistical nightmare. If a corridor connected Module A at time minus X and Module B at time plus Y, any exchange of resources or steps in the procedure was fraught with contradiction. Realizing that patchwork solutions only intensified the distortion, the physicist and astrophysicist returned to analyzing the phenomenon's core cause. They posited that cosmic events, some unknown high-energy process, were hitting Earth's magnetosphere, while the ISS mass and electronics inadvertently resonated with that input, generating micro-wormholes or closed time-like curves. If so, shutting or disrupting the resonance might require a more dramatic step. The station's crew started entertaining the idea of significantly altering their orbit or performing an abrupt maneuver, a strategy that carried enormous risk. Yet the alternative seemed worse, continuing to exist in a labyrinth of repeated hours or partial chronologies, or eventually losing the station altogether. The next chapter would chronicle how they pulled together a final plan, hoping to end the crisis at its source. Despite ongoing turmoil, scientific inquiry continued. The particle physicist and the visiting astrophysicist, occasionally joined by the geophysicist and the robotics engineer, compiled every anomaly log into one big dataset. They correlated each time glitch with electromagnetic spikes, cosmic ray surges, and the station's orbital location. Gradually, a clearer, albeit still disconcerting, pattern took shape. They discovered the glitches tended to cluster around specific latitudes and longitudes on Earth, particularly areas where the planet's magnetic field was weaker or more perturbed. One primary hotspot, the South Atlantic anomaly, infamous for its elevated radiation levels affecting satellites. Though the SAA typically caused minor disruptions, it now seemed to be the epicenter of these temporal distortions. The short-term astrophysicists theorized that some unknown exotic particles might be generated in Earth's upper atmosphere, near the magnetic weak point. These particles, upon colliding with the ISS metallic hull at high speed, might spawn short-lived distortions in space-time. He speculated that the ISS itself, by virtue of its shape, mass distribution, and ongoing high-energy experiments, might function as a resonant amplifier, like a cosmic waveguide for the phenomenon. Alarming as it was, it at least explained why other spacecraft in higher orbits or different inclinations saw no such events. The ISS was uniquely large and artificially active, thus accidentally fostering a time-bending environment. As their analysis sharpened, it became evident that if the crew did nothing, the distortions would grow. According to new projections, they risked being consumed by an expanding temporal vortex, losing all reference to normal time. A desperate question arose. Could they alter the station's orbit to steer clear of repeated passes through the SAA? The geophysicist and the life support specialist concluded that major orbital changes required external spacecraft and large fuel reserves, neither of which were immediately available. Even if they could, the anomalies seemed following the station, feeding on local resonance. The notion of simply escaping might not solve it. During transmissions with Earth, Mission Control admitted it had no immediate rescue solution. Launching new vehicles would take weeks, and there was no guarantee that they wouldn't get caught in the same distortions. Some scientists on the ground suggested letting the ISS deorbit in a controlled manner, effectively sacrificing the station to prevent a larger temporal crisis. That prospect horrified the crew, who were unprepared for a meltdown scenario in orbit. While sifting data, the geophysicist ran advanced magnetic field models that predicted an exponential surge in anomalies over the next few days if nothing changed. She found one glimmer of hope. If the ISS could somehow break the feedback loop causing the resonant effect, the phenomenon would subside. The astrophysicist concurred, suggesting a synchronized attempt at shocking the station's entire electromagnetic state, essentially shaking it free from the cosmic signal by combining a thruster burn with a specialized EM broadcast that would scramble the local resonance. This was essentially the same line of thought that led to the partial attempts they had made. However, the new plan required a bolder approach, a highly calculated moment to push the station physically while also emitting carefully timed waves. Everyone realized it would be a high-stakes gamble, but the alternative was an irreversible entrapment in time loops. With the commander's approval, the entire team rallied around a do-or-die maneuver to be executed during a pass near the SAA's strongest region. If they could produce a single, well-timed impulse that disrupted the swirling effect, they might free the ISS from the glitch altogether. In the days prior to launch of their big plan, the ISS crew tested both mechanical and electromagnetic systems to the limit. Meanwhile, time slips accelerated. Sometimes, half the station lost 30 minutes, while the other half continued unaffected. Crew found themselves questioning what was real. As contradictory logs proliferated, the crisis was reaching its apex. The commander devoted himself to verifying structural solidity, instructing thorough checks of each docking mechanism, solar array condition, and hull integrity. If they fired thrusters while part of the station was out of phase, the torque could tear modules apart. The idea alone was nightmarish, yet there was no choice. The medical officer laid out a medical contingency plan for a high-stress event. Some crew showed chronic fatigue and micro-awakenings, caused by repeated timeline confusion. The possibility of stress-induced errors soared, so she insisted on short rest shifts, vitamins, and mild stimulants. Everyone recognized the station's survival hinged on peak concentration during the final maneuver. The robotic engineer readied the robotic arm and the station's interior drones to measure any abrupt mechanical deformation. She established repetitive calibration routines in hopes of detecting an anomaly in real time if the station twisted or jolted. The plan was to feed that data into a central hub, guiding last-minute corrections. The particle physicist, and the visiting astrophysicist pored over the cosmic ray logs and the station's electromagnetic environment. They needed to finalize the waveform for the interference broadcast. The key was hitting the right amplitude and phase at the precise second the station's thrusters fired. Any mismatch could worsen the distortion. They practiced partial broadcasts at low power, measuring subtle changes, and refined the final sequence. The life support specialist checked the docking cargo ship's fuel supply, which was normally used for station reboost or repositioning. The plan entailed using that craft to impart a short but forceful impulse. Despite its limitations, it had enough propellant for one decisive burn, plus a margin for minimal corrections if something went awry. He also had to ensure environmental systems wouldn't fail mid-burn from the electromagnetic surge or the sudden jolt. The geophysicist mapped out the next orbits to find the precise crossing of the SAA that offered maximal resonance. Over each 90-minute orbit, the station would pass near the region, but subtle differences in Earth's field lines meant some passes were stronger triggers than others. She pinpointed a single orbit that best matched the cosmic signal's predicted surge, ironically using the same phenomenon that threatened them. The timeline to readiness was extremely tight, no margin for second chances. Mission control on Earth gave partial blessings, though they harbored deep reservations. Many ground staff doubted that shock therapy for time distortions would succeed. Yet they recognized the ISS crew had knowledge and impetus not available to anyone else. So the entire team braced for a once-in-a-lifetime feat, reminiscent of a science fiction plot. Time must be reset by combining dynamic forces and electromagnetic pulses at the cusp of a cosmic anomaly. On the final night before the planned maneuver, time slip activity peaked. It felt like the phenomenon was reacting. Of course, that was an anthropomorphic view, but the coincidence was alarming. Some clocks locked onto meaningless times. One computer spontaneously rebooted with year-old configs. Each sign underscored that the station hovered near a meltdown of normal time. The crew had no choice but to forge ahead in hopes their carefully orchestrated plan would realign them with standard reality. When the designated orbit arrived, the ISS approached the targeted zone of the South Atlantic anomaly. The commander, staring at the main console, awaited the geophysicist's signal that the station was precisely over the region. Everyone else stood at their respective stations. Without exchanging words, they all felt the tension. Seconds before initiating, a sudden mini-time glitch nearly derailed the schedule. Some astronauts perceived a slowdown, others a speed up. Still, as they overcame the disorientation, the commander ignited the cargo craft's thrusters right on cue. Simultaneously, the particle physicist and the astrophysicist triggered their meticulously engineered interference broadcast. The station rattled, power systems flickered, and bright arcs danced across certain panels. They had never tested so strong a pulse. Instantly, the ISS velocity shifted, pushing it into a slightly higher orbit. Meanwhile, the EM wave slammed into local cosmic anomalies. The station's metal hull groaned under stress, and multiple monitors flickered with static or incomprehensible readouts. Everyone felt an eerie jolt in their minds, like their perceptions of time had gone out of focus. For fleeting moments, each crew member glimpsed disjointed mental images of possible timelines, events that might have been or never were. Then, after what felt like an eternity but was only seconds, the combined engine burn and EM wave concluded. The thrusters cut off, silence returned. The interior hummed softly as life support systems stabilized. Most of the crew took a moment to reorient themselves, heart rates spiking from the adrenaline and confusion. Gradually, they checked the station's telemetry. They found the ISS in a new, higher orbit speed, and attitude stable. The next crucial question: had the distortion ended? The robotics engineer confirmed no immediate sign of repeated or missing seconds in the arm's data logs. The doctor and life support specialist saw normal oxygen usage patterns, and the geophysicist confirmed the crossing of the SAA had concluded with no big EM surges flaring up. Hope glimmered as the physicist and astrophysicist scanned cosmic ray detectors and found drastically reduced anomalies. For the next hour, no time disruptions were logged. Everyone recognized it might re-emerge, but each successive orbit remained calm. The mania of repeated time slices seemed gone. In essence, the station's big shock maneuver had apparently broken the resonance loop that fueled localized time warps. Realizing they might have succeeded, the exhausted crew sat in mute relief, mindful that they had just survived one of the strangest spaceflight dangers in human history. Though the crisis appeared over, the entire episode left deep marks on the crew. Physically, many astronauts showed signs of chronic fatigue, disrupted circadian rhythms, and a pressing need to rest. The medical officer devised a rehabilitation protocol: gentle exercise, balanced supplements, and scheduled, uninterrupted sleep to help them recover from weeks of stress. Psychologically, everyone grappled with the memory of colliding timelines. In the final days, many had witnessed fleeting, alternate events that ended up negated or overwritten by the station's attempts to re-establish continuity. For instance, the robotic engineer recalled a phantom extravehicular activity never officially carried out. The physicist had a hazy recollection of a catastrophic station depressurization that likewise never happened. These half-remembered incidents felt more substantial than dreams, shaking each astronaut's sense of reality. To cope, they agreed to compile their personal experiences in a communal log. Each wrote about recollections, lost intervals, or illusions of contradictory versions of the same day. They admitted confusion, but also recognized the value of archiving these subjective impressions for any future academic or mission-based study of time anomalies. They believed that, from these accounts, planetary science might glean crucial knowledge on the fragility of temporal flow. The commander sent a comprehensive debrief to Earth, explaining how they overcame the crisis using the cargo craft's thrusters and tailored electromagnetic signals. Ground control, stunned, commended them for initiative but also demanded thorough documentation. The Earth-based agencies had to weigh the station's continuing operations against the possibility of reoccurrence. Cautiously, normal station functions resumed. They reactivated dormant scientific modules, rechecked reliability, and saw no further time dislocations. The geophysicist restarted her observational tasks, analyzing Earth's gravity anomalies and tectonic shifts, albeit with added caution. Meanwhile, the short-term astrophysicist took advantage of the stable environment to finalize data collection. A portion of his immediate research pivoted to investigating the meltdown they narrowly avoided, framing it as an impetus for new cosmic ray detection methods or advanced caution in orbital labs. The entire expedition's schedule changed focus toward understanding and documenting this brush with cosmic unpredictability. Over the following months, rotation schedules brought new crew. The doctor monitored lasting health effects on those returning to Earth. Some reported persistent nightmares of broken time, or insomnia triggered by fleeting illusions that an hour or day might vanish again. Scientists on Earth grew eager to examine these cases, considering them an unprecedented test of mental resilience under cosmic-level anomalies. Ultimately, the station succeeded in returning to a typical routine, an incredible testament to resourcefulness and calm under pressure. Yet the sense that time itself could bend or tear away left its impact. Even though daily life among the modules normalized, everyone knew they had touched on cosmic mysteries far beyond common experience or standard astrophysical theory. Weeks after the station stabilized, a semblance of normalcy was restored. The ISS, with solar panels extended like silent wings, continued circling Earth every 90 minutes. Within its pressurized modules, the residue of that temporal breakdown lingered as living history. Mission logs and personal journals documented the phenomenon in detail, awaiting thorough review by Earth's top minds. In response, some ground-based teams started working on specialized chronometers or time seismographs that might detect nascent distortions if such an event recurred. Others pushed for stricter guidelines, limiting high-energy experiments in low Earth orbit unless protective measures were in place. Indeed, the official mission report recommended caution. No more advanced or untested experiments that could inadvertently amplify cosmic anomalies. The fate that nearly befell the ISS was a stark warning. For the astronauts, the journey turned philosophical. They had confirmed the possibility that time, assumed stable and unchanging, could, under special cosmic triggers, become fractured and chaotic. Their successful fix suggested it remained possible to mend such cracks, but at enormous risk. They realized there was likely far more lurking in the universe, forces that could rewrite the fundamental rules of everyday life. Eventually, most of the original crew returned home, carrying unique experiences that overshadowed typical microgravity science. They faced medical evaluations, talked privately about nightmares of indefinite loops, and gave hush-hush briefings to space agencies. Though the event was not immediately shared with the global press, it inevitably leaked in partial form, fueling rumors that the ISS had nearly been lost in time. Official statements described an electromagnetic anomaly, but withheld details about repeated seconds or contradictory logs. Inside the ISS, new arrivals kept hearing whispers about the time fracture mission, gleaning lessons on resilience and readiness for the unexpected. The station continued its primary research roles: technology demonstrations, Earth observation, scientific collaboration. But now it carried a quiet legacy. It had once ripped free from a cosmic trap that threatened to dissolve its entire timeline. That experience served as both a triumph of human ingenuity and a testament to the hidden dangers orbiting Earth. The astronauts had witnessed a realm beyond standard physics, leaving them humble, perhaps even anxious, yet also proud to have prevailed. In sum, the tale of the ISS's time travel crisis attested to the universe's capacity for surprises beyond imagination. The resolution, that deft combined thruster burn and electromagnetic broadcast, affirmed that human resourcefulness can sometimes patch reality itself when it cracks. And while the timeline now ran smoothly, those who lived through it would forever bear the memory of a station spinning above Earth, caught between multiple fragmented hours, and the steadfast teamwork that wrested them back to normal time.